The man who first handed Carlos Alcaraz a racket may be the one person who can never watch him play like a normal father. At 23, Alcaraz can defeat legends, lift Grand Slam trophies, and smile through pressure that would crush most players. Yet inside his box sits Carlos Sr., watching every forehand with the eyes of a father, former player, and lifelong tennis coach. Would you call that pride or a beautiful relationship trapped inside a results business? Here is the cruel irony. Carlos Sr. helped build the dream, but the bigger that dream became, the less private their bond appeared. One facial expression becomes tension. One quiet conversation becomes a family crisis. Apparently, tennis fans now believe they can read relationships through a television camera between changeovers. Hit subscribe because we are separating the real sacrifice from the online theater, and revealing why the story of Alcaraz with his father may be more heartbreaking than any defeat he has suffered on court. The story begins long before Carlos became a Grand Slam champion. Tennis was already part of the Alcaraz family in El Palmar, Murcia. His grandfather helped establish a local tennis club, and Carlos Alcaraz Gonzalez, better known as Carlos Sr., grew up around the game. He became a talented player and competed at a strong national level in Spain. However, progressing into professional tennis required more than ability. Coaching, equipment, tournament fees, and constant travel demanded money his family did not have. Carlos Sr.'s playing dream ended before he could discover how far it might have gone. That history matters because years later, when his son showed unusual talent, Carlos Sr. understood both sides of the opportunity. He knew what tennis could offer, but he also knew how quickly a career could disappear without financial support and proper guidance. Carlos began playing at 4. His father was one of his earliest coaches, but there is an important difference between guiding a talented child and controlling his entire future. Once Carlos's ability became obvious, his family looked beyond the local club. Agent Albert Molina noticed him at a young age and helped the family understand what would be required to build a professional career. Then came a major decision. At 15, Carlos moved to Villena to train at the academy of former world number 1, Juan Carlos Ferrero. That meant leaving the familiar system created by his father and accepting a different authority. For Carlos Sr., this was not a small step. He had taught his son the foundations of the sport. Now he had to trust another man with the next stage of that development. Some tennis parents never manage that transition. They continue coaching from the stands, interfere with professional decisions, and treat the player's career as a family possession. Carlos Sr. largely avoided becoming that type of public figure. Ferrero coached, while the father remained part of the support system. Ferrero improved Carlos's discipline, tactics, fitness, and understanding of professional competition. Meanwhile, his family remained the stable base he could return to when tournaments ended. By 2022, the plan had worked beyond anyone's expectations. Carlos won the US Open and became the youngest world number 1 in ATP rankings history at only 19. Suddenly, the little boy from El Palmar was no longer simply a promising Spanish player. He was being advertised as the next ruler of men's tennis. Yet that historic breakthrough also changed the relationship between Carlos, his father, and the outside world. Before the fame, Carlos Sr. could attend matches as a parent who understood tennis. After the US Open, television cameras began searching his face whenever Carlos struggled. A serious expression could be presented as disappointment. A conversation inside the player's box might create rumors about disagreement. If Carlos became frustrated, viewers immediately looked toward his father or coach for somebody to blame. The family had entered a strange new system. They were essential when Carlos won, but suspicious whenever he lost. The problem grew because the public wanted a simple explanation for every result. Carlos could not merely have an inconsistent day. Someone must have advised him badly. His scheduling could not simply be difficult. Somebody must be controlling him. During Wimbledon in 2023, reports claimed Carlos Sr. had filmed Novak Djokovic practicing. The story quickly gained attention because Alcaraz and Djokovic were leading contenders for the championship. Djokovic's practice was reportedly visible to many people. Carlos also explained that his father was a huge tennis fan who regularly watched and recorded players. There was no secret tactical document, no hidden camera inside a tennis ball, and no proof of an organized spying operation. Still, the incident revealed something important. Carlos Sr. could no longer behave like an ordinary tennis fan because every action was connected to his son's rivalry. The pressure did not stop with individual incidents. Alcaraz was also carrying expectations created by the end of the Big Three era. Roger Federer had retired. Rafael Nadal was dealing with injuries. Novak Djokovic was still chasing major titles, but tennis was already searching for its next global leader. His speed brought comparisons with Nadal. His shot-making reminded people of Federer. His flexibility and ability to defend produced comparisons with Djokovic. Those compliments created an impossible standard. Fans were effectively asking a teenager to replace three of the greatest players in history at the same time. Carlos Sr. had wanted his son to receive the opportunity that he never had. However, the opportunity soon became a global obligation. Carlos was expected to win, entertain, smile, remain humble, avoid injuries, and protect the future popularity of men's tennis. Injuries made that pressure more serious. Carlos's aggressive movement and packed schedule repeatedly raised questions about his physical future. Any withdrawal produced a fresh debate about whether his team was managing him correctly. Those conversations affected his father because Carlos Sr. had watched the physical demands of tennis his entire life. He knew winning another trophy was valuable, but protecting his son's health had to matter more. The professional operation wants preparation and consistency. Sponsors want appearances. Tournaments want star power. Fans want another classic match. A father, however, wants his son to return home healthy. His Netflix documentary, Carlos Alcaraz, My Way, made that conflict easier to understand. It followed his 2024 season and explored the balance between the discipline of an elite career and his wish to enjoy being a young man. Carlos did not reject hard work. His results proved that, yet he also refused to accept that greatness required living like a machine. That position sometimes created tension with the professional expectations surrounding him. Coaches naturally focused on preparation, recovery, and winning. Carlos also wanted time with friends, celebrations, travel, and a life that did not revolve around the next practice session. Neither side was completely wrong. A coach must consider the player's career. Carlos must consider the person who will remain when the career ends. Carlos Sr. understands professional ambition because he once pursued it. At the same time, he knows Carlos as his son, rather than a rankings position or commercial product. That distinction is crucial. When Carlos returns to Murcia, he has said that his family treats him like a normal person. He has continued living with his parents and brothers during his time at home, even after earning millions and becoming internationally famous. His trophies may be stored around the house, but his family does not bow when he enters the kitchen. His mother can still complain about him bringing home too many shoes. Honestly, she may be the only person in tennis who can defeat him without facing a breakpoint. Those ordinary details show why home remains important. It gives Carlos an identity outside professional sport. However, they also expose the cost of his schedule. Elite tennis operates across countries and continents for most of the year. Players move from hard courts to clay, then grass, before returning to hard courts again. Carlos may technically live with his family, but tournaments keep him away for long periods. His father and older brother sometimes travel with him, while his mother and younger brothers often remain home. The tragedy is not that Carlos and his father have lost their relationship. It is that success has made their relationship harder to protect. Carlos is no longer the child who simply follows instructions. He is an adult champion with his own opinions about scheduling, coaching, preparation, and personal freedom. His father must respect that independence even when he disagrees with a decision. That is a natural shift in any family, but most families do not experience it in front of millions of viewers. If Carlos changes his team, people search for his father's influence. When his approach becomes more relaxed, critics wonder whether the family is protecting him too much. Juan Carlos Ferrero's position added another layer. Alcaraz repeatedly praised Ferrero and described him as more than a coach. Ferrero had been part of Carlos's development since his teenage years, so their connection naturally became personal. Some fans treated that closeness as though it reduced the importance of Carlos Sr. Yet a professional mentor and a biological father do not have to compete for the same position. Ferrero handled the technical demands of the tour. Carlos Sr. represented family history, early sacrifice, and emotional support. Alvaro contributed as a brother and hitting partner. Problems arise when outsiders collapse those roles into one dramatic question: who truly controls Carlos Alcaraz? The logical answer is that no single person should control him. At 23, Carlos must become responsible for his own career. Advice remains important, but the final decisions increasingly belong to him. That process might produce disagreements with coaches or family members. Disagreement does not automatically mean betrayal. Growing up requires separation. Carlos Sr. once made the major choices because his son was a child. He selected opportunities, approved professional guidance, and helped protect the family's investment. Now Carlos has enough experience to decide what kind of life he wants alongside his trophies. That development may be emotionally difficult for his father. Carlos Sr. spent years helping to build the career, but good parenting eventually requires letting the child take ownership of it. This is where the family's story becomes more meaningful than a cheap scandal. Carlos Sr.'s unfinished tennis dream did not simply transfer into his son's hands. It forced him to learn when to guide, when to trust another coach, and when to allow Carlos to choose for himself. Carlos faces an equally difficult duty. He can appreciate his father's sacrifice without living entirely according to his father's expectations. Gratitude should not become a contract that controls every future decision. No confirmed evidence suggests that Carlos rejects his father. Publicly available information points toward a close family relationship. Carlos regularly credits his upbringing, returns home whenever his schedule permits, and values the normal treatment he receives there. Every tournament now carries consequences for the entire team. A major victory brings praise and money. A poor run brings questions about coaches, fitness, motivation, and family influence. Caddies, trainers, physiotherapists, agents, relatives, and sponsors are all affected by the form of one young player. That is the larger system surrounding Carlos. His father may have started the journey, but he no longer controls the conditions around it. So let me ask you directly, did Carlos Sr. give his son freedom through tennis, or did that opportunity create a different kind of pressure? My view is that the answer contains both. Without his father, Carlos might never have picked up a racket so young. He may not have received the early training that revealed his talent. Without the family's willingness to seek outside help, he might never have joined Ferrero's academy. Those decisions created opportunity. Fame then added expectation, public judgment, exhausting travel, and the loss of privacy. That created pressure. The emotional power of this story comes from those two truths existing together. Carlos Sr. can be proud of what his son achieved while still worrying about what the career demands from him. Likewise, Carlos can love and respect his father while wanting control over his own future. No villain is necessary. Modern sports commentary often wants one because villains make easier thumbnails. Yet the real story is more complicated and far more human. A father who could not complete his own professional journey helped his son reach the top. Now he must watch that son deal with consequences neither of them could fully predict. Carlos has money, trophies, endorsements, and global fame. What he cannot purchase is a return to the days when tennis was merely a game played beside his father at the local club. Every match now affects rankings. Each decision becomes news. Every look from the player's box can be turned into a rumor. That innocence is gone. The challenge ahead is not simply winning more Grand Slams. Carlos must create a life in which success does not remove his enjoyment, independence, or connection to his family. His father's challenge is just as serious. Carlos Sr. must continue offering support without allowing tennis to define every part of their bond. If they can maintain that balance, their story will not end as a tragedy. It will become an example of a family surviving extraordinary success. Failure would not necessarily look like a public argument. It could be quieter, emotional distance, constant pressure, or a relationship in which every conversation eventually returns to tennis. That possibility is what makes the situation heartbreaking. Drop your opinion in the comments. Should Carlos Sr. remain closely involved in his son's career, or should he step further back and allow Carlos to build a completely independent path? One side believes family keeps Alcaraz grounded. Another argues that every great champion eventually needs complete control. Both positions carry risks. Family involvement can provide loyalty and stability, but it can also blur personal and professional boundaries. Full independence creates freedom, yet it can leave a young athlete surrounded by people whose main connection to him is business. Carlos must choose the balance that protects both his career and his identity. The man who handed him his first racket has already completed the most important part of his job. He opened the door that had once closed on his own dream. Now, Carlos must decide where that road leads. His father can watch, advise, celebrate, and worry. However, he cannot play the points, stop the criticism, or make every difficult decision for his adult son. Perhaps that is the real pain of the story. Carlos Sr. gave Alcaraz the tools to reach the top, but reaching the top also meant entering a world where a father's protection has limits. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for our next tennis story. Then give us your final verdict. Is Carlos Alcaraz fulfilling his father's unfinished dream? Or has the weight of that dream made a normal father-son relationship almost impossible?